Hello and welcome back to the Red Alert Armory series. In this one, we're talking about the Tesla Towers. In this episode, we're going over a subject that we've gone over before in a different video, a more general one, Tesla technology, but specifically the Tesla Towers. The Tesla Towers are an incredibly important part of the battlefield in the Red Alert universe, as it perfectly expresses the comparison between the Allies and the Soviets. While the Allies may make use of high technology, at least for the time, such as missiles or light-based weapons like the Prism Towers, the Soviets use much more outdated technology, but in much higher numbers and with much more efficiency than the experimental tech of the Allies. The Soviets might still use simple steel armor on their vehicles or airships as their main bombing forces, but they do so in a way that promotes their style of warfare. A tide of heavy armor falling like a ton of bricks. The Tesla Towers are exactly like that, and represent the most primal forces in their arsenal, pure energy. Tesla Towers can be seen in-game vaporizing enemy soldiers and dealing serious damage to enemy armor, outright destroying the many lighter pieces, and most importantly, on command. But this begs the question, how does it do this? And would a Tesla Tower be effective against vehicles and infantry as we see it in-game? The Tesla coil in real life was invented by Nikola Tesla in 1891, as Wikipedia defines a Tesla coil as, quote, "A Tesla coil is a radio frequency oscillator that drives the air core double-turned resonant transformer to produce high voltages at low currents. Tesla's original circuits and most modern coils use a simple spark gap to excite oscillators in the turned transformer. Most sophisticated designs use transistor or resistor switches or vacuum tube electric oscillators to drive the resonant transformer," unquote. It goes on to explain that, quote, "Tesla coils can produce output voltages from 50 kilovolts to several million volts for large coils. This alternating current output is in the low radio frequency range, usually between 50 kilohertz and 1 megahertz. Although some oscillator-driven coils generate a continuous alternating current. Most Tesla coils have pulsed output. The high voltage consists of a rapid string of pulses of radio frequency alternating current," unquote. This is essentially what a Tesla Tower from the game is. A very large Tesla coil that has the ability to hit specific targets on demand, as well as avoiding other targets that the Soviets would rather not be fried beyond all recognition. A Tesla Tower, on the other hand, is something different. Wikipedia defines a Tesla Tower as, quote, "A largely experimental wireless transmission station designed and built by Nikola Tesla on Long Island in 1901 to 1902, located in the village of Shoreham, New York. Tesla intended to transmit messages, telephony, and even facsimile images across the Atlantic Ocean to England and to ships at sea based on the theories of using the Earth to conduct the signals," unquote. The closest physical comparison to this in-game is the one that the Soviets made the Eiffel Tower into, although that was also used to make much larger range strikes against targets. Theoretically, if Tesla was indeed the one to invent the towers for the Soviets, then that means the Soviets could use the devices as long-range wireless transmission devices that could allow them to transfer information many, many miles without the Allies being able to intercept them. The Soviets not using satellites primarily means that in conjunction with this tech, the Soviets might have had a secret method of communication that could be used to communicate with spies far behind the lines of the war through radio transmitter versions of the National Socialist Enigma boxes, translating and decoding the transmissions in ways that the Allies were not able to intercept. This is an unbelievably important part of the Soviet war machine, which might be able to help explain their ability to coordinate on the sort of scale as in Third World Wars, both iterations, without heavy use of satellite networks. This will be explored more in a future video concerning the Soviets' invasion of America in the first Third War iteration. Tesla coils, as mentioned earlier, can reach into the millions of volts in terms of power, which is an extreme amount of electricity, as in comparison most household electronics or even most weapons technology today use only a fraction of that. The strikes that coils are capable of making are comparable to severe lightning strikes, which have the following effects according to Wikipedia. Quote, Direct effects. Direct strikes. The person is part of a flash channel. Enormous quantities of energy pass through the body very quickly, resulting in internal burns, organ damage, explosions of flesh and bone, and nervous system damage. Depending on the flash strength and the access to medical services, it may be instantaneously fatal or cause permanent injury and impairment. Contact injuries. An object, generally a conductor, that a person is touching is electrified by a strike. Side splash. Branches of the currents jumping from the primary flash channel to electrify the person. Blast injuries. Being thrown and suffering blunt force trauma from the shock wave if it's very close, and possibly hearing damage from the thunder. Indirect effects. Ground current or step potential. The Earth's surface changes race towards the flash channel during the discharge. Because the ground has high impedance, the current chooses a better conductor, often a person's legs, passing through the body. The near instantaneous rate of discharge causes a potential difference over the distance, which may amount to several thousand volts per linear foot. This phenomenon, also responsible for the mass reports of mass reindeer deaths due to lightning storms, leads to more injuries and deaths than the above three combined. EMPs. The discharge process produces the electromagnetic pulse, which may damage an artificial pacemaker or otherwise affect normal biological processes. Visual artifacts may be induced in the retinas of people located within 200 meters or 650 feet of a severe lightning storm. Secondary resultant effects, explosions, fires, and accidents." Unquote. The effects of lightning strikes can vary quite a bit because the strikes from the sky are not always at the very highest voltage possible, which explains why we might see videos of people surviving being hit even multiple times by strikes, whereas we might see a strike on a building leave a massive hole. Fortunately for the Soviets, and unfortunately for everyone else, the Tesla coils that the Soviets use are always at their maximum voltage for maximizing lethality. Strikes from the coils that hit a person are likely to cause, at the very least, extreme bodily damage to their nervous systems, organs, or other part of the body that will render them combat ineffective. At this highest level, the strike could cause them to explode, wholly or in part, showering the nearby area in burnt meat and blood. No body armor available at the time or now could stop such a blast and be effective in other combat zones, so any infantry not sufficiently screened by other forces stands essentially no chance against these towers. Range might not even be an appropriate defense either, as the average length of a lightning bolt is 2 to 3 miles, and if directed at a target within that range, then a strike could be lethal at similar ranges to tank cannons, allowing the towers to strike unprepared targets easily. Towers placed on hills or towers that are quite large could take advantage of the environment to destroy targets at simply horrifying ranges. The only defense at this sort of range would be stealth, as if the tower is directed in its strikes, then the person at its controls must first spot them. So if one is hiding, can get a shot in, or is using long-range artillery, these towers could be dealt with fairly safely. And a Tesla tower that is severely damaged is a very effective hazard to Soviet forces nearby, emitting bolts of electricity at short ranges, possibly hitting and damaging Soviet personnel and base defenses. Seeing one of these destroyed would likely be quite the spectacle. Think for a second about how horrifying a weapon this could be to face. It could strike you from miles away, a bolt of lightning from a blue sky, sending a massive boom of thunder every time it's discharged, turning the men around you into clouds of vaporized blood and bone. There is quite a large elephant in the room, however, and that is just how exactly is it possible to get one of these things to strike a target on command? Well, most of the lightning strikes are actually seemingly random, following the path of least resistance to a target. Controlling the location of a strike traditionally would mean controlling the variables around the arcs, and that simply cannot be done in the heat of the battle. So I did a bit of research to see if there was any way to direct the strikes, and I found something very interesting. Linked in the description will be a link to the site where I found this information, but suffice to say, it explains that lasers can be used as lightning rods to direct the path of lightning to safer targets. This research was done by Swiss scientists in 2021 and found that a powerful enough ionizing laser can be used to direct and control the path of lightning during storms, all but eliminating the damage that storms can do to life and property. I have to tell you, as a non-scientist, I don't fully grasp how all this works, but if it could be done to draw lightning out of storm clouds, then I feel safe in making the assumption that it could be done in reverse, to guide lightning from Tesla coils, making an effective weapon out of electricity. If so, then we can solve the problem of how these bolts can hit a specific target on demand and render the Soviet Tesla towers effective. Now, could this have been done with the technology available at the time? That's debatable. In our timeline, lasers were not advanced enough to be used in this way, but with Red Alert 2 and 3's separate iterations of World War III being much further advanced than our timeline, it's possible this could have been done. In fact, I will posit that it is likely that this was done by allowing Tesla or students to look at prism tech, to develop ways to use lasers in interesting ways, even if they were not viable as weapons for most of the time. The next question is, would this have had the same effect on vehicles as it would on infantry? Unfortunately not, as far as I can tell. Strikes on cars that happen every day aren't very effective. Most of the strike is absorbed by tires, and most of what it does is just light a fire and cause structural damage. What could be useful, however, is the effect that the electricity has on electrical systems, which is akin to an EMP. Striking a tank with a powerful enough bolt could cause irreparable damage to the electrical systems of the vehicle, forcing the crew, if they survive, to bail out or risk being captured or cooked alive in their vehicles. Hardened vehicles could conceivably take several strikes from the coil before being knocked out, but most would be disabled rather quickly, making them the best counter to this device being either artillery, long-range missiles, or a very large group of armor to overwhelm its ability to disable the attacking force. With this level of tech, the Soviets could indeed use the towers as extremely effective weapons, and have base defenses that easily outrange the prism weapons that the Allies use. This makes them the obelisk of light of their universe and an imposing weapon to have to fight against. It's no wonder that the forces of the free world had to resort to WMDs and teleportation to finally break the Soviets in the campaigns of Red Alert. As a special edition, I want to add some interesting thoughts by Video Crow's Nest, longtime friend of the channel. Paraphrasing here, he mentions that there is an interesting pseudo-religious angle to consider here. Communists are all about the anti-religious theme, especially the Soviets, who are in real life atheistic as a state position on religion. At the same time, the original Rus people were actually Norse, and settled along the rivers into the Black Sea, and the Norse famously have thunder gods as their patron deities. You could definitely see the Russians, who were very anti-religion, as having a great deal of pride in the Tesla coils, totemically seeing them as the harnessing and overcoming of the power of the gods. That would be an incredibly powerful propaganda symbol. Another thing he mentions is the unintended perk of having the coils be a hazard when destroyed or damaged, and this would inevitably cause the conscripts to fight all the harder, as they might be subject to that very danger. Additionally, I would like to add that it adds a little special threat to them that perfectly continues the Stalin-era no-step-back policy. Thirdly, he brings up an interesting detail that you can see in the video on screen of an Abrams being struck by a continuous bolt, undoubtedly damaging it more by simply heating up and cooking off any ammunition inside, pointing to the possibility of the coils actually having separate firing modes for different targets, which 100% could be true. Thank you once again to everyone in the Discord, and especially Video Crow's Nest and Bad Guy 292 for their wonderful help in this script for this video. I want to thank everybody once again, and if anyone is interested, I have a Patreon up where you can donate to that, or if you're looking for a more sure way to help, that you can't spare anything at the moment, then by all means, please give a like and a subscribe. That'd be great. Thank you very much. I have been Game Master Karakin, and I will see you in the next video.